you. And let's wait. Now I want to go to share screen. We'll go back to that, and I'll figure out my problem later. Um, okay. So, all right. Oh, so, so hopefully today's lesson will make sense because we're in a fast, and fasting is for whatever reason getting harder for me. Um, that my brain can focus here. So let's start. Um, yeah, it's 11:05. So the Mishnah, we're going back to the Mishnah for the chapter 4, and in it it stated Parasha Gedola Korin Ota B'Shnayim B'Shacharit Uva Musaf Uva Mincha Korin Al Pihen. So the problem is, how do you break up that phrase? Because if you see in the Hebrew, that the trend he translated it, a long passage is read by two people, and they read from the Torah in the morning prayer and in the additional prayer, period. And in the afternoon prayer, they read the daily portion by heart, just as one recites the Shema. But the confusion is that it doesn't break that up in the Hebrew. It just says two people read it. A long portion is broken up by two people in the morning at Musaf, at Mincha. They read it by heart. Well, which one did they read by heart? All of them? Two of them? One of them? Just Mincha? So it's not really clear, and that's where the question comes. So uh, a dilemma was raised before the sages with regard to what case is the Tana speaking. Does he mean that in the morning prayer and in the additional prayer they read the portion from a Torah scroll, but in the afternoon each individual reads by heart, just as one recites the Shema? Or perhaps this is what is taught. In the morning, they read it from a Torah scroll, but in the additional prayer and in the afternoon prayer, they read it by heart, just as one recites the Shema. Where do you put the semicolon is the question. But they have another baraita that clarifies it. Tashma, Tanya b'shacharit u'v'musaf nichnasin leveta knesset. In shacharit and at musaf, they enter the synagogue. And they read it the same way you read Torah all year long in morning services. Uva mincha yachid korei ota al peh. And in the afternoon, an individual recites it by heart. So it's the same passage, but it's recited by heart in the afternoon. I'm not really sure. It doesn't explain to us why. Let's see. The note here didn't explain why. Just that this apparently means that a member of the congregation would serve as a kind of prayer leader and read these chapters before the entire community. Rabbi Yossi takes issue with this ritual as he maintains that the Torah is not read by heart by an individual in public, with the exception of the high priest on Yom Kippur. So it's not clear why you're reading it by heart. Why switch in the afternoon? It doesn't tell us. But here's the Rabbi Yossi's disagreement. Amar Rabbi Yossi, v'chi yachid yachol likrot divrei Torah al peh b'tzipur, ela kulan nichnasin v'korin ota al peh k'korin et shema. So he says, he questions, when does an individual ever stand up and read a portion of Torah, other than high holidays, by the high priest, by heart? Rather, he says it's like the Shema in this sense, that everybody reads it together, just like we do in Shul today, where we, hi Gamliel, just like we read today the Shema, where everybody recites it together. So that was his decision, or his opinion.
So what are they reading here? Are they progressing through the Torah, or is there just
creation passages?
Okay, so they could well be expected to memorize them.
That. Oh yeah, right. Because it was just, you're basically reading just each day, so it's just 10 verses or something like that.
But segments repeat every week, so.
Right. But you don't have to memorize it that morning while it's being read from the scroll.
Right. They probably would have had it memorized already. But it is a question, like why would you read it from a scroll in the morning but by heart in the afternoon? I don't know, and I didn't find an explanation. But then we go back to the Mishnah, another passage. Kol yom sheyesh bo halel, ein bo ma'amad. Any day that you have the recitation of Hallel, but on which the additional offering was not sacrificed. So basically, we're talking Hanukkah. It has no reading of the Torah by the non-priestly, by the Ma'amad, that group of non-priests, the Israelites who are supporting the priests, their local priestly group. They don't do the Torah reading. They don't have that Ma'amad service. Now, what's not clear also, and this is going to come up in a little bit because this was, which is going to get more confusing. Nowhere does it tell us what the Ma'amad service is other than that there's a Torah reading. I don't know if that was the entire service or whether there were other readings in it. It wasn't in Art Scroll. It wasn't in Steinsaltz to explain to us what they do other than this Torah reading. So, but in any case, so that's why he adds here, it has no Torah reading. The Hebrew just says there's no Ma'amad service, but he has no reading of the Torah by the Ma'amad group. On days that have both Hallel and an additional offering, like Rosh Chodesh or something like that, or Chol HaMoed, there was no reading in the afternoon prayer. So then they don't do that section in the afternoon. And when a wood offering was brought, which we had those select days during the year when they would bring wood offerings, there was no reading Ma'amad service at the closing prayer. So the confusion here right away is that we were told there was, nowhere did it say there was a Torah reading at the Nila service. So what reading is there? I don't know. So it's a little confusing. But in any case, there's no Ma'amad. Whatever was the Ma'amad, you didn't do it in the Nila service when you had a wood offering day. And the reason is that, the reason why you're not doing the Ma'amad part, whatever that was, whether just Torah reading or more, is because you have all these additional pieces to the service. And so I guess they were sensitive to, just like us, you can't have the service go too long. So the Gemara asks, Ma hefresh bein zeh lezeh? What's the difference between this and that? That is, a day on which an additional offering is sacrificed and a day on which a wood offering is brought. And the Gemara explained that halalu divrei Torah v'halalu divrei sofrim. So these days on which an additional offering is brought apply by Torah law, but these days on which a wood offering is brought apply by rabbinic law, and therefore it overrides the closing prayer. So, wait a minute, let's go back here. On the days that have Hallel, there was no reading the afternoon prayer. So this is what, and this is some of the confusion here, but the assumption is this. Okay, so let's go back again. On days that have both Hallel and additional offering, you cut out the Torah reading and whatever else was in the Ma'amad service in the afternoon prayer, but it doesn't say that you cut it out in the Musaf service. So the assumption here at this point is that you're still reading the Torah on a day when you, let's say, Chol HaMoed, when you have Hallel and Musaf, you're still reading that additional Torah reading at Musaf. It's only in the afternoon prayer that you cut it out. So the question, therefore, was, I think we'll go to the notes here. The question, therefore, is, well, why do you not remove it from the Musaf service, but you do remove it from the Nila service? This Ma'amad readings, whatever they and the explanation is because Musaf is from Torah law, but Nila was something that the rabbis added. There's no discussion of Nila in the Torah. So let's see. He explains it here. Many interpretations have been offered for this obscure statement. Rashi explains the question as follows: why is the closing prayer treated with less importance than the afternoon service. And the Gemara's answer is that there is more of a basis for the afternoon service in the Torah, treated with less importance than the afternoon service. Okay, I'm not, why is this less importance than the afternoon service? There was no reason.
Yeah.
Less than. So the afternoon service is more important, is what that's saying.
Right, exactly. But
Because it's
also taking the at least his commentary here was that it's the Musaf offering that you're reading, you're still doing. See, it says here in the on days that you have Hallel and a Musaf offering, there's no reading in the afternoon, and there's no reading in the evening, and at the Nila service. So where's the difference? Why is one being treated less importantly? The Gemara says there's more of a, but there's certainly, I mean, it's true what you think. There is a basis for the afternoon service in the Torah. Alternatively, the Gemara is inquiring about the difference between the two types of offering. Why does the additional offering override the afternoon service, whereas the wood offering does not? Okay, according to the Rambam in his commentary, the Gemara is asking why the recitation of Hallel takes precedence over the wood offering. Maybe we should, okay, wait, you know what? Let's go back to the Mishnah. We've got to go check the Mishnah out. I have a feeling that we're missing information here. Where was the Mishnah? Okay, so here we go. 3 times a year. All right, so all right, so 3 times in the year, priests do the Nisiat Kapayim. Okay. Do fast days and gatherings of non-priestly watches have an additional prayer? The Gemara explains that the Mishnah is incomplete. Okay. 3 times a year, the priests raise their hands, Nisiat Kapayim, each time they pray. And on some of times, it's 4 times. The morning, the additional, the afternoon, and the closing, the Nila prayer. All right. And then these are the times they do it. Now, where was the Mishnah? With regard to the prince of that was about drunkenness. Okay. Oh, come on. So spreading their hands in any event. Come on.
I think it's page 157.
157, it's up here.
The last the last paragraph of that top right before.
Oh, here it is. Yeah. Ben Azai said to, okay, here we go. Yes, here's the, right. Okay, so we did the long passage by 2, short passage by 1. They read it in the morning in the additional prayer, the Musaf service. In the afternoon, they enter and read it by heart. And the Shabbat Eve okay, that's Shabbat Eve. Okay, on any day that has the recitation of Hallel, but on which the additional offering was not sacrificed, Hanukkah, there's no reading of the Torah by the Ma'amad in the morning prayer. On days that have both Hallel and an additional offering, okay, that's Chol HaMoed, the non-priestly watch would also not read from the Torah at the closing prayer. This is Rabbi Akiva's opinion. When a wood offering was brought on these particular days, there was no non-priestly watch in the afternoon prayer. That's Rabbi Akiva's version. Okay. Then we switch it around. Ben Azai switches it in the name of Rabbi Yoshua. When you have an additional offering, Musaf, that's a Chol HaMoed, there was you had no Ma'amad in the afternoon. When a wood offering was brought, there was no Ma'amad in the closing prayer. Okay, so what was the idea that somehow Mincha is not as important or is more important. I mean, that Nila is less important. I don't see anything here that's telling me that Nila, unless they're following Rabbi Akiva on the day that of the recitation of Hallel, it's not in the morning, but Hallel and Musaf, you wouldn't read it at the closing prayer, but you would continue to read it at Mincha. That's according to Rabbi Akiva. So in that case, it makes sense if we're following Rabbi Akiva, because then you would say, yeah, because on Chol HaMoed you have a Musaf offering, but you still recite the Ma'amad service at Mincha. Only when when the wood offering was brought, would you not say it at the afternoon prayer. I think that's all I can. So maybe maybe we're assuming at this point that it's Rabbi Akiva. He hasn't rescinded yet. Wait, I forgot where we were. 27. Okay, so it's a little. This whole Ma'amad thing was very confusing, and we haven't even got to the part that I thought was confusing. Okay, so the way that I read it here without his notes, which seems to me to make it more confusing. Well, let's see. Let's just go through this. Maybe, okay. According to the Rambam in his commentary on the Mishnah, the Gemara is asking why the recitation of Hallel takes precedence over the wood offering. The answer is that Hallel on Hanukkah applies by rabbinic law, and therefore the status of Hallel is in need of reinforcement, whereas there is an allusion to the wood offering in the Torah. The Rambam's text of the Gemara apparently included the sentence, a matter of rabbinical law requires reinforcement. Well, that's true. Rabbinic law often requires reinforcement, but Torah law does not, because everybody knows the Torah law. Others understand the answer similarly, but interpret the Gemara's question in a different manner. Why should the wood offering, which applies by rabbinic law, override the non-priestly watch, for which there is more of a basis in the Torah? Okay, so that makes a little bit of sense to me. Why are you not saying, okay, it says here, on days that have both Hallel and additional offering, there was no reading in the afternoon prayer. But when a wood offering was brought, which has an allusion to the Torah, within the Torah, there was no reading in the closing prayer. So you're saying that, but Hallel is not Torah. So that seems to be the question. But that's not the answer is these days on which the additional offering is applied by Torah law, but these days on which the wood offering is the rabbinic law, and therefore it overrides only. Oh, I see. I guess I was thinking this is cumulative. That's what the problem is. When the wood offering is brought, you recite the Ma'amad in the morning and in the afternoon, but not in the evening. When there's Hallel, I guess when there's Hallel on a Musaf offering, there's no reading in the afternoon prayer, but there is at Nila and in the morning, I guess. So if that's it, the answer is that there is more of a basis for the afternoon service. I'm still a little bit confused.
I take from this that the commentators were confused too.
Oh, yeah. No, because I mean, we haven't even explained what the Ma'amad is other than because what's the Ma'amad in the Nila? If you're not reading Torah in the Nila service, then what's the Ma'amad service? So that's a little confusing too. All right, well, let's go on. Just leave that as confusing. Zman Atzei Kohanim ve'Ha'am. The Mishnah continues a list of the times for the wood offering of priests and the people. The sages taught, why was it necessary to state the times for the wood offering of the priests and the people? They said in response that this is what happened. Kishe'alu b'nei hagolah lo matzu etzim balishka. When the people came back from Babylonia, they didn't find wood for the lishka, the chamber where they kept the wood and to keep the fires going at all times. Ve'amdu elu v'hitnadvu mishalahem. And so a group of certain individuals came forward and they donated of their own stocks the wood for the temple. V'kach hitnu nevi'im shebenehen shafilu lishka male'a etzim. And then later on, the prophets, must have been the last prophets, Malachi and Zechariah, determined that ever forward, these families would get the honor of bringing the wood. Yihiyu elu mitnadvim mishalahen, shene amar, as it says in the book of Nehemiah. And we cast lots, the priests, the Levites, and the people, for the wood offering to bring it into the house of our God, according to our fathers' houses, at appointed times year by year, to burn upon the altar of the Lord our God, as it is written in the Torah. Although these donations were not always necessary, it was established that all generations would observe these days. So going forward, even though now they'd been established, the temple had been reestablished, and they didn't really have to worry about it, these families had the honor of donating the wood every year. So just be careful what you volunteer to do, because now the families are doing it every year. But it was obviously considered an honor. Now, here are they mention the days. V'imah kohanim leviim v'chol mi v'chulei tanu Rabbanan mehayu b'nei gonvei Eli u'b'nei kotzei Ketzion. If you remember, we mentioned before in the Mishnah, we had all these families who they named them. We'll get to them in a moment. They named these families, but then they had this weird group, the gonvei Eli, the thieves, the pestle thieves, and the how did they translate it? Well, who are the terms of those who deceive, the pestle deceivers, but there's really the pestle thieves, and the fig cutters. He translated as those who packed dried figs. But kotzei is also to cut. So the fig cutters. Who are these people? So then we get the little story. Amru pamachad gazra malchut harisha'a shmad al Yisrael. So the evil kingdom, and here it's supposedly the Greeks. So this is the time of the Chasmonean revolt. Obviously, it's not so clear as to when. There's always an evil decree by some kingdom that forces the Jews to change their ways. So this evil kingdom issued a decree that the Jews could not bring wood for the temple, and they couldn't bring their first fruits to Jerusalem. And so they placed guards, v'hoshivu pros da'ot al drachim kederech shehoshiv Yerovam ben Nevat shelo ya'alu Yisrael l'regel. So they put up guards on the roads, just like Yerovam, the son of Nevat, who was the first king of Israel, of the northern tribes, placed guards so that the Jews could not ascend for the pilgrim festival. They don't explain it here. I think he explains it a little bit later. But Yerovam didn't want the people up north to keep going down to Jerusalem to give their offerings for the temple, because he's losing revenue by people doing that, and he's also losing authority, because people see Judah, the land of Judah, as the center of Israel. So he posted guards, and then he built his own temple with put idols in it, and that's where he wanted the people to bring their sacrifices, their offerings.
This is basically a political.
Right. So that was that, and so it's just interesting that they compare it to Yerovam. Of course, that's a
Yeah.
But here they're talking about this Greek.
Comparing the methods used.
Yeah. So this was how so what, oh, but now we get, this is how smart Jews are. So what did they do? Me'asu ksherin v'yirei chet shebe'oto hador. What did the worthy individuals, the sin-fearers, do in that generation? Heviu saleb v'kurim v'chipum b'kitziot v'unatlum v'eli al kitfehem. What they did is they brought their baskets of first fruits, but they covered them with dried figs, and they took them with a pestle on their shoulders. And so why were they doing that? They'd get to the guards and they'd say to them, where are you guys going? And they'd say, La'asot shnei igulei devela b'machteshet shelefanenu uve'eli she'al kitafenu. So they say, oh, we're going to get, we're making pressed figs with the mortar that is down on the road before us and with the pestle that we're carrying on our shoulders. So they say, okay, well, if that's what you're doing, that's okay. Kevan she'avru mehen itrum besalim ve'aviyun l'Yerushalayim. But as soon as they
trying to imagine the size of this pestle that they had to carry on their
right
shoulders.
Yeah. Plus, as soon as they passed the guards, they decorated the baskets of first fruits and they brought them to Jerusalem. Now, they have stories like this is the reason why the tradition gives us why we say the Shema in the Kiddush of Musaf, in the Kedusha of Musaf, because it was again a time of persecution, and I forget if it was the Romans or the Greeks who wouldn't allow the Jews to say the Shema during the service. So the Jews were so smart, they pushed the Shema into a later part of the service, and then they would say the Shema. And you just have to wonder, like, okay, so did the Greek guards not figure out that once the Jews got to Jerusalem, they threw away the dried figs? So it's always just kind of little humorous to me that they were such dumb, it's like the if you ever watch the television show Hogan's Heroes, all the German guards were always idiots, never figured out what the prisoners were doing. Okay, so that was
going back to the one for storing the wood. It's interesting that it sort of calls back to the beginning of the tractate where you're not supposed to anticipate a miracle to happen to you, because it's a parallel to the Hanukkah miracle of oil that would last longer than what is necessary. Meanwhile, they're being very pragmatic. They're not going to assume that the wood will burn enough. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It'll be just fine. They're no, go find people to donate, figure it out, get volunteers. They're going to volunteer in perpetuity, stuff like that.
Okay,
so
good. That's very good.
I'm also wondering with this.
Oh, wait, I lost you.
That had something to do with how the guards behave.
Oh, okay. All right. Now I wonder if my computer's not doing so, because I lost you for a second there. Okay. Well, let's keep going. So here's the second story. Here's story number 2. What's going on here? Story number 2 is a sage taught. So a similar story about the descendants of Salmai ben Netofat. They said in explanation, once the evil kingdom of Greece issued a decree of apostasy against the Jews, very similar to the first story, that they may not bring wood for the arrangement of the altar, and that they may not bring first fruits to Jerusalem. And they placed guards on the roads in the manner of Jerovam, son of Nevat, placed guards so that the Jews could not ascend for the pilgrim festival. So what did these clever Jews do? These sin-fearers, they would bring pieces of wood and prepared ladders. And they made the wood into ladders, and they placed the ladders on their shoulders. They went to Jerusalem. When they reached the guards said, okay, so where are you guys going? And we're going to the dovecotes, because they would have these, these people use doves for various things, some for eating, but also for sending messages, I think. Oh, and also gambling. I think they did races with doves. So we were going to the dovecotes, and we need the ladders to go up to them. So as soon as they passed the guards, though, they took apart the ladders and took them to Jerusalem. And then here's a clever allusion to this story, because Salmei sounds like Sulam, which is a ladder. Ve'alehem ve'al kiyotze behem hu omer zecher tzadik livracha. May the memory of the righteous be for a blessing. Ve'al Yerovam ben Navat ve'chaverav ne'amar v'shem risha'im yirkav. So then at the end of this stories, we get an explanation of a passage in Proverbs, which we still say to this day, that zecher tzadik livracha. They did explain though here, wait a minute, somewhere he had a note, maybe it was in the Art Scroll, that because of the conclusion here about Yerovam, there's some people suggest that the evil decree was not Greeks, but it was at the time of Yerovam, when he was keeping Jews from going from Judea. So it's a little unclear as to who the evil kingdom was. So could have been foreigners, but it could have been fellow Jews when the kingdom was split. Okay, here's the next. Oh, and then we get this passage about the people who gathered the wood. So we want to know, who are these people? The Mishnah taught on the 20th of Av, the wood offering was brought by the descendants of Pachat Moav ben Yehuda. And we have a teaching from a Baraita that the descendants of Pachat ben Moav, Bnei Pachat ben Moav ben Yehuda, Hein Bnei David ben Yehuda. That he's called, it really was David and his family. David, who was Ben Yehuda, he translates here as son of Ben Yehuda, literally son of Judah, but it could be of the tribe of Judah, because David was of the tribe of Yehuda. And it makes sense that he would be Pachat Moav because his grandmother, or great-grandmother, I think, great-grandmother, was Ruth, who was a Moabite. But Rabbi Meir insisted it was Rabbi Yossi rather suggested that was okay. Rabbi Meir was the first opinion. Rabbi Yossi suggests no, it was Yoav ben Seruya. Yoav ben Seruya was a cousin of David, and he was also the head of his army. So he suggested it's Yoav. Now, then we get another teaching on the 20th of Elul, Be'esrim Be'elul, B'nei Adin ben Yehuda. So who's that? Well, we have another Baraita, Tanu Rabbanan. B'nei Adin ben Yehuda, Hein B'nei David ben Yehuda. So here the connection is David was called Adin. This is based on a verse that appears in a list of David's mighty men, chief of captains, who was Adino, the Eznite. The Gemara identifies this individual with David. Okay, so once again, we have an allusion in this name, Adin ben Yehuda, to David, because David is also of the tribe of Judah, and he may have been referred to as Adin. But that's Rabbi Yehuda's understanding. Rabbi Yossi says, no, that's Yoav, son of Tzeruya. So he's, again, another teaching that these are descendants of Yoav. Now, then we get to Be'achad B'Tevet, the first of the month of Tevet, Shavu B'nei Parosh Shniya. On the first of Tevet, the descendants of Parosh returned for a second time. Now, wait a minute. Who's coming back for a second time? Obviously, we haven't mentioned Parosh yet. So one of these people that we've mentioned already is assumed to be also Parosh. They're the same people. But who is it? Is it the opinion of Rabbi Meir? Because he said it was Pachat Moav ben Yehuda, was David. And if Parosh is David, okay, But again, it's not. Rabbi Meir suggested it is Pachat ben Moav. No, that's not Parosh. Rabbi Yehuda said it was Adin ben Yehuda. That's not Parosh. Nor is it Yoav ben Tzeruya. So the Gemara has to figure it out. Rabbi Meir litne shavu b'nei David ben Yehuda shneah. Let them teach. If it represents the opinion of Rabbi Meir, well, let them teach with regard to the 20th of Av up here, Pachat Moav, that the descendants of David ben Yehuda returned for a second time. So it would be that Parosh and Pachat Moav are the same family. Rabbi Yehuda, if it was Rabbi Yehuda's understanding that it's Adin ben Yehuda, litne shavu b'nei David ben Yehuda shniah, he should have taught that the David, the son of the tribe of Judah, returned a second time. So that means Adin ben Yehuda and Parosh would be the same family. And Rabbi Yossi litne shavu b'nei Yoav ben Tzeruya shniah. If the Mishnah represents the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, let him teach that the descendants of Moab, son of Zeruiah, returned for a second time, because he maintained that Pachat Moab and Adin ben Yehuda are descendants of Yoav. So that would have been a third time. So that's, he's got to clarify what it is. So the Gemara's resolution is actually it is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. And there are two Tanaim whose opinion is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. So one Tana said that Pachat Moav are really Yoav, and another Tana said Adin ben Yehuda was really Yoav. And then whether you followed one of these Tanaim or then Parosh returning was of one of these two versions of who Yoav is. That's how they resolve it. According to both opinions, neither group was repeated a second time, and therefore the Mishnah does not pose a difficulty for either of them. They just had different ideas. So it's basically Rabbi Yossi there were two versions of Rabbi Yossi's opinion. Okay, now we get to the part that I found confusing, if it hasn't been confusing enough already. Be'echad b'tevet lo hayav.
I have names already.
Yeah. Be'echad b'tevet lo hayavo ma'amad. On the first of Tevet, there wasn't a ma'amad. Because first of Tevet, it was Rosh Chodesh. You've got a Musaf offering. It's Rosh Chodesh, you're reciting Hallel. And they told us in the list, one of the days that was a wood offering was the first of Tevet. So you had all of these three reasons, and there was no mamad. Markashisha ben Berei the Rav Chisda the Rav Ashi asked, Ma'ishna Hallel de dache didei, u'ma'ishna Musaf de lo dache didei. So what's the difference about Hallel that it overrides its own watch? Meaning, when you say Hallel, you override Shacharit, the Ma'amad of Shacharit. And what is the difference about the additional offering that it does not override its own watch? That is, again, going back to Ben Azai's version, the addition, when on a day when there was a Musaf offering, you don't say the Ma'amad at Mincha, but it's suggested that you do say the Ma'amad service at Musaf. So why don't you just not, why does Hallel cancel out Ma'amad in the morning when you say Hallel, but the Musaf offering doesn't cancel out the Ma'amad of Musaf? Just in the but you push it off to the afternoon. So Amar le Rav Ashi, Hashta de lav didei dache, didei lo kol shechein. So he seems to suggest, now as the additional offering overrides the watch of the afternoon service, which is not its own, is it not all the more so that it should take precedence over its own watch? That is, it seems that what his answer is of course the Musaf offering Ma'amad is canceled out. How could it not? I mean, if it's going to if the Musaf offering causes the afternoon service Ma'amad to be canceled, certainly it would cancel out the Musaf service. And then Rav Chisda said to Rav Ashi, okay, it should have said Markashisha here. This is a mistake in his in Steinsaltz. It should have said Markashisha. Said to Rav Ashi, what I meant was the opposite, as this is what I am saying to you. It should not take precedence over another watch, that of the closing prayer. Rather, let it override only its own watch, the one performed in the additional service. Okay, so he's saying, why does it take over? Why does any other service, the ma'amad of any other service, get canceled because of the Musaf offering? Musaf offering should just take care of its own, it shouldn't impact on any other service. So then Rav Ashi said to him, there is Rabbi Yossi, the Ka'e Kivatach. So Rabbi Yossi agreed with you. In a Baraita, according to Rabbi Yossi, the Tanya, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Kol Yom Sheyesh Bo Musaf, Yesh Bo Ma'amad. On any day on which there is an additional offering, there is a Ma'amad. Then the Gemara clarifies, Ma'amad Demai. Which Ma'amad are we referring to? Ilema Ma'amad de Shacharit, Hatana Kama, Nami Hachi Kamar. If we say that Rabbi Yossi means the non-priestly, the Ma'amad of the Shacharit service, but the first Tana also said this. Oh, I guess there was part of a Baraita that they didn't have the whole thing here, I think. Okay, well, anyway, Ella Ma'amad de Musaf, Dide Nami Lodache. Rather, Yossi must mean the non-priestly watch of the additional prayer. I mean, the Ma'amad of the Musaf service. On any day that there's a Ma'amad, there is a non-priestly watch. Okay, so there must be a Ma'amad at Musaf. However, this too is problematic. Is it possible that the additional offering does not override even its own watch during the additional service itself? Okay, so Ella de Mincha. So Rabbi Yossi must be referring to the Ma'amad of the Mincha service. Okay, because he taught that on a day that there's Musaf, there's a Ma'amad. But he couldn't, so therefore he couldn't mean that the Musaf overrides the Ma'amad, because he just said it's both. I mean, that you have both the Musaf and the Ma'amad. So therefore, Ella de Mincha, he must be referring to the Ma'amad of Mincha. Korban Eitzin Dache. But this is puzzling also. For if the wood offering overrides the watch, the Ma'amad of the Mincha service, the Musaf service, the Musaf offering should take precedence over it. Okay, but that doesn't, but we learned from Ben Azai that the wood offering, it wasn't that the wood offering overrides the Ma'amad of the, no, it wasn't. Okay, I don't know. This was very confusing to me. Shmamina de dide dache, de la dide lo dachi shmamina. So the conclusion is this. Rather, is it not the case that Rabbi Yossi was speaking about the Ma'amad at Nila? One can learn from this that the Musaf offering overrides the Musaf service, but doesn't override a Ma'amad that is not its own. And the Gemara concludes, indeed, learn from this that this is the case. So basically,
I think what they're going for is that as long as it gets done, that's fine, but it can't, it won't override anything else, but only itself, meaning as long as you get it done that day. I think it has a lot to do with the first of Av being more, having multiple things going on.
Yeah.
It's sort of just work it in there somewhere and it's fine. Just don't forget to do it by the end of the day.
I guess. I don't know. I was just so, and of course I'm fasting right now, so now my head is really. But all right. But here, this is a good question. This question I understood. So the Velitne Nami, let the Mishnah also teach, because one of the other wood offering days was the first of Nisan. There's no there's no Ma'amad, because it is a day on which Hallel is recited. It's Rosh Chodesh. So there was Musaf. And there was also wood offering. But, so this was an interesting thing. It says, Zot Omer Halela Divresh Yarcha Lav Deoraita. Now the difference here is, remember, this is the first of Nisan. The previous one that we're talking about was the first of Tevet. First of Tevet is Hanukkah. And so it's a little different. The first of Nisan is just Rosh Chodesh. And so therefore they had declared that Hallel on Hanukkah was, somehow we declared it Torah law. But Hallel on Rosh Chodesh, which is a Torah festival, is not required by Torah law. It's simply a custom. Here, I think he's got the note here. One should not infer from the statement that the celebration of Hanukkah is an obligation imposed by Torah law. Rather, the recitation of Hallel on Hanukkah is a Torah obligation, as there is an obligation to recite Hallel whenever the Jewish people are miraculously delivered from an impending calamity. And the miracle of Hanukkah certainly warrants Hallel. That's how they understand it. It's a Torah obligation because Hallel is supposed to be recited on these days when Jewish people were saved by a miracle. And that's Hanukkah. Conversely, the recitation of Hallel on the new moon is a custom, as the new moon is neither classified as a festival, even though it is in the Torah, and nor does it commemorate a miracle performed for the Jewish people. So I thought that was just really interesting, that because we recite, and it is true that we recite short Hallel on Rosh Chodesh, unlike other festival days. In fact, this is where we explain it.
So isn't Hallel later than Torah?
What do you mean? You mean the creation of the Hallel recitation, the prayers called Hallel?
Yeah.
Absolutely, right. That was, they're come from Psalms. And,
Right.
But the idea is that some type of celebratory recitation should be made on these special miracle days. I'm not sure, it doesn't tell us here, and I don't, oh, well, here it does. In Pesachim, could have looked this up. Pesachim, obviously, it's determined that Hallel is a Torah obligation, to recite Hallel. So what the specifics of what we recite could have come later, but the idea of praising God through some kind of celebratory recitation is done. It is a Torah obligation. It's only later, perhaps, that we determine what the recitation would be. But that the Torah commands. But on the new moon, it doesn't necessarily require Hallel, which is, again, as I was saying, that we recite the shortened version. The only other days that we recite the shortened version of Hallel is the last days of Passover, and that's from the custom that the last day of Pesach is the day of the crossing of the Sea of Reeds, in which the Egyptians all died, and we don't want to say full Hallel because of the death of the Egyptians, because that was it was death of human beings, and so therefore, because we don't say it on the last day, we don't say it on the previous days, because we always go up in holiness, not down in holiness. So only the first 2 days, as we'll find out in a moment, do we say the full Hallel, but all the other days of Pesach, we recite partial Hallel. So here we learn. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yehotzadak. So Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Shimon, the son of Yehotzadak, Shmona Asar Yom Bashana Yachid Gomer Bahen et HaHalel. That an individual should recite Hallel. And we're talking about full Hallel here, the entire Psalms 113 to 118. Ve'elu hein, Shmonat Yemei HaChag, 8 days of Sukkot, including Shmini Atzeret. Shmona Yemei Chanukah, the 8 days of Hanukkah. Yom Tov HaRishon Shel Pesach, first day of Pesach. Yom Tov Shel Atzeret, the holiday of Shavuot. Uva Gola, and in the diaspora, Esrim ve'achad Yom. There's 21 days, because you've got additional days of the holidays. Ve'elu hein, Tisha Yemei Hechag, 9 days of Sukkot plus Shmini Atzeret, because you've got that extra day of the holiday. Shmonat Yemei Chanukah, 8 days of Hanukkah. Shnei Yamim Arishonim Shel Pesach, first 2 days of Pesach. Ushnei Yamim Tovim Shel Atzeret, and the 2 days of holiday for Shavuot, which is called Atzeret in Rabbinic Hebrew. Rav Ikla leBavel, Rav went up to Bavel. So Rav was one of the great leaders of Babylonian Jewry, but he came from Jerusalem. He came from the land of Israel. Chazenhu de karu halela bereish yarcha. And he saw that they had a precedent of reciting Hallel on Rosh Chodesh. Savar la'afsukinhu. He tried to change it, to stop it. Kevan dechaza deka midalgei delugei. But when he saw that they did it in which they didn't recite the full Hallel, they skipped parts of Hallel to show a distinction between Rosh Chodesh and the other holidays. Amar shmamina. Minhag avotehem biyadehem. This is a custom of their ancestors that they are keeping. And Tana Yachid lo yatchil ve'im hitchil gomer. So here it's in the end it's taught that on Rosh Chodesh, if you were davening by yourself, you really shouldn't say Hallel, but if you started it, you should complete it. But today, I think the custom is pretty much ingrained that we say Hallel on Rosh Chodesh. And here, the difference, of course, being an individual and the community. The community should have, yes, say it, but the question is whether an individual should say it. Okay, now we get to the calamities that happened on the 17th of Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. Actually, I realized I should have planned it this way, that we were doing next week's page today, because next week's page is all about Tisha B'Av. But we'll start with 17th of Tammuz. Chamisha dvarim eru'u et avotenu b'shiv'a asar b'Tammuz. 5 calamitous things happened to our ancestors on the 17th of Tammuz. Nishtabru haluchot. The tablets, Moses smashed the tablets, the 10 commandments. Minalan, where do we learn this? Tanya b'shisha l'chodesh nitnu aseret hadibrot liYisrael. Okay, so we've got to do a little calendar work here. On the 6th of the month of Sivan, the 10 commandments were given to the Jewish people. Okay, that's Shavuot. Rabbi Yossi Omer b'shivabo. He says, though, it's actually given on the 7th. Mande amar b'shisha nitnu uv'shiv'a ala Moshe. So those who say that the Jewish people received the 10 commandments on the 6th of Sivan, they would also say that Moses went up to the Mount Sinai. You know, after he gives the Ten Commandments, then he goes up, according to the Torah, then he goes up to Mount Sinai for the next 40 days to receive the rest of Torah. And then Mande Amar B'Shiva, but Rabbi Yossi, who said it was the 7th that we received the Ten Commandments, B'Shiva nitnu u'V'Shiva ala Moshe. On the 7th, we were given the Ten Commandments, and on that same day, Moses went up. For it says, it's written, V'yikra el Moshe b'yom hashvi'i. He called to Moses on the 7th day out of the midst of the cloud. Uchtiv, and it's also written, V'yavo Moshe b'toch ha'anan v'yal el hahar. He went up the mountain into the cloud. Vayihi Moshe b'har arba'im yom v'arba'im laila. He was therefore, then he was on the mountain for 40 days and nights. Okay, so 7th was the day he went up. Esrim v'arba de Sivan v'shitzar de Tammuz milulo arba'in. So here are the 40 days. He went up on the 7th, and then 24 days remaining in Sivan, plus 16 days of Tammuz, that comes to 40 days. On the 17th, B'Shivasar, the Tammuz, Nachet, on the 17th day, he went down. V'tavrin hu laluchot. And that's when he saw the people around the golden calf, and he broke them in his anger. As it's written, he got close to the camp. He saw the golden calf. He smashed the luchot, the 10 commandments, the 2 tablets. He smashed them beneath the mount. So this shows the tablets were shattered on the 17th of Tammuz. Batal hatamid, the daily offering was nullified, and this was a tradition that had occurred. And when was this period? When the daily offering? Opinions differ with regard to the calamity mentioned here. The Jerusalem Talmud indicates the 17th of Tammuz marks the suspension of the daily offering during the period of the Second Temple, but some say it occurred during the First Temple. Okay. So that was another calamity. The third calamity, Huvka'a Ha'ir. The city walls were breached. B'Shiva Asar, the question is asked, because it's written, Vakativ, B'chodesh HaRevi'i B'tisha L'chodesh B'yechezak Ra'av Be'ir. In Jeremiah, it's written, in the 4th month, on the 9th of the month, the famine was severe in the city. And then immediately afterwards, it's written, Vatibaku Ha'ir. Then a breach was made in the city, which indicates that it was made on the 9th. Amar Rava lo kashya, kan barishona, kan bashnina. We're talking about the 2 different temples. Yes, in the time of Jeremiah, the first temple, the city walls were breached on the 9th of Tammuz, but the second temple was the 17th of Tammuz. The Tanya, barishona huvka'a ha'ir b'tisha b'Tammuz, Bashnina b'shiv'a asar bo. And we have a baraita which states exactly that. There were a different time when the first temple and the second temple walls were breached. Okay, here's another thing that occurred on the 17th of Tammuz. Saraf Apostamos et HaTorah. Apostamos, who was a Greek general, publicly burned a Torah scroll. And there too, Gemara. Gemara here means tradition. It's a tradition that he burned it on the 17th. And finally, Ha'amid Selim Behechal, Minalan. Hakativ, Dichtiv, Ume'et Husar Hatamid Velatet Shikut Shomein. On the 17th of Tammuz, Menashe, this is an evil king, placed an idol in the sanctuary. So the Gemara asks, from where do we derive that this occurred on the 17th of Tammuz? As it is written, and from the time that the daily offering shall be taken away and the abomination that causes the appalment is set up, which indicates that an idol, the appalment, a shikutz, was placed in the temple on the very day that the daily offering was suspended. So here we go. Remember, we had two traditions. Some commentaries maintain that the daily offering was nullified in the first temple period. Well, here, that's when it would have been done by Menashe, this evil king. He would have nullified the daily offering, and he would have set up a idol at the same time in the temple. V'chad hava, is it true that there was only one idol put into the temple at that time? V'akativ, in Daniel it says, V'al kenaf shikutzim mishomeim, upon the wing of detestable things shall be that which causes appallment. So it's a plural, so there must have been more than one. Amar Rava trei havu, there were two of them. Two idols were set up. V'nafal chad al chavrei utvarei le lidei v'ishtakach dehava ketiv ant savet lecha ruvei beta yadcha ashlimat le. There were two idols. One fell upon the other and broke its hand. Since only one idol was whole, the Mishnah mentioned only that one. Rava continued, and an inscription was found on the broken idol that read, "You want to destroy the temple? I have given you your hand." So this is Steinsaltz's explanation. It is though one idol said to the other, "You are seeking to destroy the temple by causing Israel to pray to you. I give you a hand to assist you." But as I think I put in my notes, that the Art Scroll suggested that others read it as an attack on the idols themselves. You will not succeed, because it was it broke the idol, it broke its hand, saying that I've basically given up your hand, so you're not going to be successful. Okay, so that was 28.
The note there says there are numerous readings and interpretations of this cryptic inscription.
Yeah.
So,
it seems to me that I think the second one makes more sense, because if the idol fell on the other idol, it seems like it wasn't very effective. It was weak and crashed and broke the other one. So, but in any case, that's all these things occurred on the 17th of Tammuz. So next week, after we've observed Tisha B'Av, then we'll get to Tisha B'Av and focus on that. So, all right. So I'm sorry you can't, well, I don't know if I'm sorry you can't see me, but I can't, sorry that this video isn't working on my computer. I'll have to figure out what that is. But we'll meet next week. And Stanton's, you guys will be, you said you're not going to be here, but I'll record it once again and have it put up on the YouTube. And then the week after that, we'll finish up and we'll decide either we feel brave enough to come into the synagogue and have a celebration, or we'll continue on Zoom and just make our own goodies and celebrate with those. Okay, so everybody have a good day. Well, Tisha B'Av, we're not going to have a good day, but we'll see you next week.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, take care.
Thank you.